Hi and welcome to our next episode of Past Conversations. I have to say this is one that I've been very much looking forward to. Catching up this evening when we're recording this with Simon Verdegem. Simon is someone who I've been lucky enough to have met on a couple of occasions, and each time we do, I have to say it's always something pretty cool. So catching up with him tonight is awesome. Simon is an archaeologist based out in Belgium, but what I'll do is I'll let him introduce himself and say hello.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me and for inviting me to have a conversation together. So, as Paul said, I'm Simon Verdegem, as we say over here. I'm a Flemish archaeologist working for a commercial firm here in Flanders. And my main focus is First World War archaeology. So the past couple of, I think, 7-8 years, I've done almost nothing else but excavating on the battlefields around Ypres and Dixmude. And my main focus within the First World War archaeology is the excavation or the recovery of soldiers.
Simon, one of the things that we've been asking, certainly most of the people that we've spoken to so far, is about their memories of studying history at a young age. Any memories that stand out for you of studying history when you're at school?
I always remember it or history being one of my favorite courses since I was a young guy. Even at the age of 6, I think I already started saying that I wanted to do something with history later on as a profession. My grandmother always recalled the story of me being in front of the priest when I did my, I don't know how to say it in English, but some Christianity thing in the church. And the priest asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, something with history. And she kept repeating it when I was in university, like you said it back then. And look, it's becoming a reality now. So my next memory is, I think, in 4th grade in high school when we went to the battlefields around Ypres, and that's when I got that thing with the First World War, and from that moment on, I started to read about it and start to learn stuff. And going to university, I wanted to do something with that First World War, and then I moved on to the archaeology because I wanted to do something with First World War as well. So.
Now, Simon, you work as an archaeologist, and I'm curious to know, what is it that you do day to day? What does your job involve?
Well, I'm the head archaeologist, or one of the head archaeologists with the Belgian Flemish commercial company called Ruben Willaert. We are in Flanders, as in many parts of Europe and in the UK as well. Archaeology is mainly a commercial activity now, and we do archaeology when the archaeological features in the underground are under threat of construction, house development, and stuff like that. So whenever that is the case, those are our clients, and they come to us, and then there's a whole there's a line of steps that we need to go through to see and to come to an eventually to an excavation. So the first step is a desktop study, which is done by some of my colleagues. I usually don't do those. And the next step is the trial trenching. So that's the first step. We go into the field and we do a certain percentage of the field that we open up to see if any of the archaeology is preserved or not. What kind of archaeology is there, or if there is no archaeology at all. If there's nothing, that's the end of the story and the construction can start. If there is something, the next step will be an excavation. usually those developers go onto the market again, and then so it's not always the case that we do the trial trenching and then continue to the excavation, which sometimes is a pity if you find something special, because you don't always know if you're going to be the one to excavate it or not. But that's how it is. So, but my job is mainly doing those trial trenching or the excavation afterwards. I prefer to do the excavations because then you have the chance to really investigate what's on site and get the whole picture within the limits of the site itself. While when you trial trench, you find features and artifacts, but you're not allowed to really go deeper into what's there, because you need to leave it for the actual excavation that will come in a later stage. After we come out of the field, there's also the part of the post-excavation, which is mainly cataloging all the finds, mapping all the features, and then bring it all together with all your, with your conclusions on what you've actually found, and putting it in context and in history and stuff like that. Within the company, we have some specialists in different time periods. So I have some colleagues that are more into Roman age, Bronze Age, stuff like that, and colleagues that do Middle Ages or more urban kind of archaeology, so within the city, which is mainly medieval to late medieval, and even quite like up to 17th, 18th century archaeology. And then me and my direct colleagues, we do the First World War parts. So about 90% of my time out in the field is around Ypres, excavating battlefields.
You've been an archaeologist now for over 10 years, and in that time, you must have so many memories. And I wonder, as an archaeologist, which excavations stand out more than others?
That's a difficult question. I think I have about 3 to 4 excavations that really stand out because of different reasons. If I just look at what was found, without a doubt, it has to be the Messine excavation, because the quality of the trenches and the dugouts and the tunnels that we found, in the level of preservation was that outstanding. It was my first big First World War excavation, but I never found something similar again. That one German trench, which was about to my shoulder high, still preserved. We had the tunnels, we had that concrete dugout with the trench leading into it, and the rifle rack still there, and a case with hand grenades and stuff like that. It's just looking at the archaeology on itself, that one still stands out as the best thing I've ever found. Looking at the experience of the excavation as in total, Helati is the one I have to say there, because with Helati, of course, we had good archaeology. The preservation was less because of the different soil type and stuff, but still it was amazing to do one stronghold on itself, and then of course the huge amount of soldiers that we were able to recover and give a decent burial afterwards. And then on top of that, doing it with an amazing support of people on site, but also following it. That whole experience was absolutely something that we'll never forget. I think speak for myself, but for many people that followed it as well. And it really showed how valuable it is to connect with people that are interested, and that to let them engage in that kind of archaeology. So I still secretly hope that we can somehow in the future. And then at last, but certainly not at least, the discovery that personally is my greatest memory is when I held that medallion of Captain Henry John Innes-Walker, the New Zealand captain that was serving in the Royal Warwickshires. I think it was about 2 to 3 days after we found him, and first artifacts began to come up, because it was quite a difficult recovery. There was a lot of items around him, and he was also there was another fellow soldier lying on top of him, so we had to remove him first before we could go deeper. And we found his medallion, and we already saw that something was, like, there was an inscription on it, but in the field we couldn't really see what it was, so we had to take it back to the office, to our headquarters on field, so to the barracks. And after we started cleaning it, those letters appeared, but it was in a difficult handwriting, and at first we didn't really see which letters it actually were. But we already knew he was Royal Warwickshire. We knew about what date he must have died, and we also knew he was an officer because of his buttons and his collar badges. So I started to look at the list of the missing, which only held 9 officer names. And then I think I went through some of their personal items of files that I could find online, and one of them was had a handwritten name under it with the Henry John Innes-Walker, but the first letters were all almost exactly the same as on the medallion. And that moment that I realized that the medallion matched that name, I'll never forget it. And yeah, it still is one of the most wonderful. I know it maybe sounds strange because it's the recovery of a soldier, but knowing that you identified him, and then of course afterwards with everything that we could have, we did with getting in touch with the family. We talked with his brother's son, who still recalled his dad talking about his brother, and he went. I think he was already 80 or 85. And since he was born, he always went, each year he went to the church, the local church, where the name of his uncle was engraved in a glass window. And then 2 years later at the reburial, some other family members came over and we went to the location where we found him. And the gratefulness of those people made it all worthwhile, and made me realize again why we do it and how important it still is to recover them, but to be able to give them a final resting place. And that's, for me, still the most important part of the job.
And lastly, Simon, just before we finish our conversation, I'm curious, if you were speaking to a young person today and they asked you about a career as an archaeologist and how to go about that, what advice would you give to them?
My main advice would be to keep believing. If you really want to become an archaeologist, just go for it, despite what people would give you as a counter advice, or say that it's not the best thing to do, because let's be honest, it's not always the most difficult job. It can be working in harsh conditions outside in the rain, mud, and bad weather. It's not always the best paid job either, I think. especially not when you start as an archaeologist. But if you really want to become one, then that shouldn't stop you, and you just have to believe in what you do. And I think that's what I did. I had a certain goal. And I knew in the beginning people said, well, why would you study archaeology? But I've never regretted one day that I did this. So just believe in what you want to become, and then I think that's the most important advice I can give.